What sort of team might Maurizio Sarri put out when you look at the last two games, the win against West Ham and the win in the Europa League in Prague? Many differences, particularly amongst the attacking players. In fact, only Kepa, Rodrigo, Jorginho and Azpilicueta played in both games. So what does Sarri do against Liverpool at Anfield, Craig?
Plays his best team.
Which is, but what is his best team?
Well, his best team at the moment would be more akin to the one that finished or played in the West Ham game, which would be not Kovacic or Barkley, but would be Ruben Loftus-Cheek, which probably should have happened a while ago. And also Callum, Hudson-Odoi on one side and Eden Hazard on the other. I think, Higuain will probably play. But more importantly, those two, Hudson-Odoi and Loftus-Cheek, because they perform well. Performed well in the Premier League. They've performed well previously in the Europa League. And I would be surprised if that wasn't it. But I don't think it's the greatest worry for Liverpool who he plays, to be honest with you. But I would imagine that's the team he's going to go with.
What are your thoughts, Steve?
I would 100% think it's the team that played at West Ham. Yeah. And quite frankly, the introduction of Hudson-Odoi and Loftus-Cheek has given this team a breath of fresh air. Thinking of Chelsea 3-4 weeks ago, it was, how are they going to get in the top four? Now you see it's a completely different Chelsea. It's a vibrant Chelsea. And I didn't think it was possible because Hazard's been Chelsea's best player all season. But he's actually looks as though he's taken a step up because of the introduction of these two young guys. They've just brought a new life to Chelsea.
Yeah. And he's flipped it around, hasn't he, Sarri? Those two were playing in the Europa League just 2-3 weeks ago and not playing in the Premier League.
Yeah, and Hudson-Odoi gave him some natural width and he held his... OK, it was against West Ham, who are a decent side, but no, they're kind of, mid-table. He held his width and that just allowed... that allowed Chelsea to stretch, particularly in the first half, just stretch the game a little bit. And obviously, Ruben Loftus-Cheek's a good runner from midfield, so that distracts people as well, and that creates spaces. And Eden Hazard was able to do some magical things in that first 45 at Stamford Bridge. But the one thing I thought about Chelsea in the first half, for a change this season, they passed the ball with a purpose. Yeah. In the first 45 at home, it wasn't against West Ham. It wasn't just passing it, the little sideways, a little back. They actually passed it quicker and they passed it forward more often with a bit of a purpose. And I think that was beneficial to the team as well.
Robbo, what do you make of Chelsea at the moment? Because, let's face it, they had an awful January, didn't they? But since then, only one loss in 12 in all competitions. But are you suspicious of this Chelsea revival at all?
No, I think it is a revival. It was only 2 or 3 games ago when they were 1-0 down at Cardiff and the crowd was singing, "We want Sarri out, you don't know what you're doing." And he made a couple of changes in that game. They win the game 2-1 right at the end. And from that moment on, they've looked a much more vibrant side. As Steve said, they've played with more forward purpose. Callum Hudson-Odoi coming onto the right-hand side. He wants to go past people with the ball. Loftus-Cheek gives them more dynamism in that central midfield area. And that's been the key to it. Passing forward, playing at a higher tempo, more pacey players running with the ball and players that can go past people, as well as Hazard and Hudson-Odoi. And then, of course, you can bring Willian on, who played very well in the midweek.
When you had Barkley and Kovacic, it was easier for the opposition to defend against. Yeah. Because neither of them want to go running into the penalty box. Now, with the Loftus-Cheek coming in, you can't, as a full-back for the opposition, you can't stand off the two wide guys. That means you're opening holes up in the middle, in the penalty box. And Loftus-Cheek can't wait to get into the penalty box. So now you're adding an extra goal scorer. So they're just a completely different team to play against.
Of course, that can turn in a heartbeat. All this, Robbo mentioned Cardiff, where they got back. I mean, it was a huge slice of luck because the officials were horrendous that day, and that benefited Chelsea big time. So they've taken advantage of that for the time being. However, their fight for Champions League football's on 2 fronts, I suppose. Europa League and the Premier League. Top 4, which is going to be tight. However, we know how fickle the business is, and if this Liverpool team absolutely need to put the hammer down. And I think the question is, can this Chelsea midfield, and more importantly, this Chelsea defence, cope with Liverpool? Yeah. Because if they don't, it could get messy for Chelsea. And all of a sudden, the knives are out for Sarri again. So it's a very fine line for him at the moment.
Seems like Sarri is sticking with Gonzalo Higuain, Robbo. Chelsea's revival happening with Higuain still misfiring, though.
Yeah, he's not playing as well as he can do, but he's still a very clever player. He makes great little runs. He's got a good understanding. One of the reasons that Jorginho is playing slightly better and passing the ball forward is because he's got a good understanding with Higuain. And he will link up the play. Hazard loves to come in field and play little 1-2s. Higuain's good at doing that. He's not scoring goals at the moment, but he is a very good player. He's a clever player so that other players can play off of him at times. And his movement is excellent. Brings defenders short, spins into the box, or doing the other thing. Sometimes he tries to make forward runs, then comes short and lets other players run beyond him. But you can only do that if, as Steve said, you've got players like Loftus-Cheek running beyond him, Hazard running beyond him, Hudson-Odoi running beyond him. That's what they need.
I tell you what, going back to that point that Robin made, if you've watched Jorginho in the last 3 or 4 games in particular, he's played, if the wide player or the fullback plays a little 10-yard ball into him, every now and again he whips it around the corner, usually over the top. And Higuain, and it's a relationship obviously they had at Napoli for a bit, and Higuain's looking to run off the shoulder of the defenders. I'm sure it's something Liverpool have picked up on, but I've seen him try to do it at least half a dozen times, and a couple of times it's actually came off. So he is looking to play the ball actually a bit more forward and sometimes being a bit more creative.
For more, sign up now for ESPN Plus.